I didn't realize my marriage was over until I saw my husband's shoe slamming into my chest, 3,000 feet above the Atlantic. 1 second I was staring out of the helicopter window, still numb from my father's funeral. The next I was weightless, air ripped from my lungs, headset torn from my ears, the open door yawning beside me like a black hole. I remember his eyes more than the impact. Calm, steady, like a man closing a door he'd already decided on. And then I was gone. The roar of the blades vanished, replaced by a thin animal scream. It took me a moment to realize it was mine, snatched away by the wind as my body spun through the empty sky. Sea, cloud, helicopter, sea again. In that impossible freefall, time stretched. I saw every red flag I'd smoothed over. The way he'd insisted on extra life insurance, just in case something ever happened to you. The way he'd taken over all our accounts, because you're too stressed with your dad being sick. The way he'd looked at me yesterday when I'd said, "We'll be okay. I just got a strange call from a law firm in New York." I hadn't told him the rest. I never got the chance, because 3 hours before this flight, I'd learned I was about to inherit $200 million from a father I'd barely known. And my husband, Ethan, the man who had promised to protect me until death, had just personally tried to speed that death up. The ocean hit me like concrete. Pain detonated across my back and shoulders. Water punched up my nose and into my lungs. The world went from blinding light to black-green silence in an instant. Cold. So cold it burned. I sank fast, the weight of my clothes dragging me down. Up and down swap places. My brain told my arms to move, to swim. But panic scattered the signal. This is it, I thought. This is where it ends. Not in a hospital bed beside my dad, not in some cliché car crash, but because the one person I trusted most decided I was worth more to him dead than alive. My chest screamed for air. Images flickered through my head. My father's face in his hospice bed. The voicemail from the lawyer I'd ignored. Ethan's hand on the small of my back. As we climbed into the helicopter, his smile is just a little too tight. I kicked. Nothing. Kicked again, harder. My shoes felt like anchors. A dim ribbon of light appeared above me. Surface. I clawed toward it, lungs burning. Every cell in my body shrieking to breathe. Just before I blacked out, my head broke through. I sucked in a ragged gasp of air and swallowed a wave instead. Salt water seared my throat. I coughed, choked, and flailed. The helicopter was a distant insect against the sky now, its tiny shape banking away. It wasn't circling back. He wasn't looking for me. There was no mayday, no frantic hover, no rope. He'd done what he came to do. I spun in the swell, fighting not to go under again. The Atlantic stretched in every direction. Merciless, endless, empty. No land. No boats. Just me, my terror, and a husband already rehearsing his tragic accident speech. As I bobbed between sky and sea, a single, vicious clarity cut through the panic. Love hadn't put me here. Ignoring what love was hiding had. I'm about to walk you through everything that followed. How I survived the ocean, the lies, and the man who wanted me erased. And as you listen, I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. At which moment would you have finally believed your instincts over his excuses? Tell me in the comments, would you have seen the danger earlier than I did, or would you have been falling through that sky right beside me? Another swell lifted me, then dropped me hard. My muscles were already shaking, turning to stone. If nobody saw me soon, the water would finish what Ethan started. Was this where my story ended? Swallowed quietly because I loved the wrong person too loudly? Or was this the violent beginning of the moment I finally put my safety above my marriage vows? The first sound I heard wasn't waves. It was voices. Sharp, unfamiliar, arguing over me. She's breathing. No, look at her lips. Get the blanket now. I tried to open my eyes. They felt glued shut with salt. My body shook so hard my teeth rattled. Warmth hit me in sudden, awkward patches. A scratchy blanket, hands rubbing my arms. The sour-sweet smell of diesel and fish. I wasn't dead. Not yet. If this kind of true story already has your heart in your throat, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when I finally confront the man who did this to me. What comes next? I never saw it coming. I forced my eyes open. Above me, a colorless sky. Beside me, two men with weather-beaten faces. Their boat bobbing on the swells like a toy. One of them said something in Portuguese I couldn't understand, then switched to broken English when he saw the panic in my eyes. "Easy, senora. You fell? From a helicopter." He mimed something tumbling from above. My voice came out as a rasp. "My husband. The helicopter." My throat closed. How do you explain that the man you love just tried to murder you? To someone you've never met? They didn't push. They got me to shore. The next hours blurred. Sirens, fluorescent lights, a needle sliding into my arm. Questions I wasn't ready to answer. I woke up properly in a small coastal clinic. White ceiling, peeling paint, the distant murmur of the ocean through an open window. A nurse with kind eyes and a neat bun hovered over me, checking the floor, adjusting my blanket. "You are lucky," she said in accented English. "Fishermen bring you in. Another 10 minutes. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "My husband," I croaked. "The pilot. Did they?" She shook her head. "No other survivors. The helicopter went down. Crash in the water." Her gaze sharpened. "They ask if you remember. You say turbulence." The way she said it made my skin prickle, as if turbulence was a script someone wanted me to read from. I swallowed, the four tugging at my arm. Images slammed back, Ethan's expressionless eyes. The hard shove, the rush of air. "It wasn't turbulence," I whispered, but my voice was so thin I wasn't sure she heard. When she left, I realized my bag was on the chair beside the bed. Somehow, it had stayed clipped to my seat, dragged down with me, and later hauled up with my half-drowned body. My phone was inside, miraculously sealed in a waterproof pouch. Hands trembling, I unlocked it. Dozens of notifications exploded across the screen. Missed calls, unknown numbers, system alerts. And one email, time-stamped just 3 hours before the flight. Subject line, regarding the estate of Jonathan Reed. My father. My throat closed. He'd left when I was 8, vanishing into a life of boardrooms and Gulf Streams and rumors. For years, all I had were headlines and a last name we shared. He died last week. I'd flown out for the funeral alone. Ethan had been too busy closing a deal to come. Today was supposed to be my chance to say goodbye to the country where he was buried. Before Ethan and I reset with a scenic helicopter tour, I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Reed, as executor for the late Mr. Jonathan Reed, I must urgently inform you that you are named sole beneficiary to an estate currently valued at approximately $200 million. The words blurred. I read them again. Sole, beneficiary, 200 million. The last time I'd spoken to my father, he'd apologized for choosing money over family. I never imagined that money would one day be the very thing that almost got me killed. I hadn't told Ethan about this email. I hadn't had time. He didn't know yet that his average wife, the one he kept on a tight budget and an even tighter leash, was suddenly one of the wealthiest women he knew. So, if he hadn't known about the fortune, why had he still chosen murder? The answer blinked at me in a new notification. A news alert at the top of my screen. Wife presumed dead in helicopter tragedy. Grieving husband speaks out. Ethan's face filled the thumbnail. Eyes red, jaw clenched just right. One hand pressed to his mouth in staged anguish. The man the world was calling a victim was the same man whose shoe I could still feel in my ribs. If I reached out now, if I called the number in that email, or the police, or even my own mother, the circle would start closing. Because if Ethan learned I'd survived, I knew in my bones he would finish the job. Lying there in that thin hospital gown, I realized I was standing at a crossroads most people never see. Let the world believe I was dead, including the man who wanted me that way, or step back into my old life and pretend I hadn't just seen his true face at 3,000 feet. If the whole world thought I was gone, was I about to get the kind of second chance most women in my position die praying for? Or was disappearing the first step into a different kind of danger I couldn't yet see coming? You don't marry a monster on day one. You marry a miracle. The monster comes later, disguised as stress, pressure, just how I am. Before I tell you what I did next in that clinic bed, you need to understand how I got high enough. for Ethan to throw me out of a helicopter in the first place. We met 5 years ago at a charity gala. I was there working, an overworked ICU nurse who'd volunteered to staff the first aid booth for some hospital fundraisers. He was there shining, tailored suit, perfect laugh, hand on every shoulder. Ethan Cole, financial consultant. The kind of man who could make even fluorescent lights feel flattering. He found an excuse to sit on my exam cot, claiming he felt a little faint from champagne. I checked his pulse. It was steady. His eyes, though, locked on mine with unnerving intensity. "You look like the only real person in this room," he said. It sounded cheesy, but when you spent your life with a father who chose boardrooms over birthdays, that kind of attention sinks in deep. We were inseparable within weeks. He brought me coffee at 6 a.m. when I got off the night shift. "Send flowers to the unit for you and your patients." We talked about our future before we'd even hit the 3-month mark. The first red flag came disguised as romance. "Babe, let me handle the money," he'd say, taking my student loan statements out of my hands. "You save lives, I'll save us from interest rates." He set up joint accounts. He moved my paycheck into them for me. If I hesitated, he pouted. "Do you not trust me? After everything I do for us." The second red flag came dressed as worry. He didn't like my best friend, Kayla. "She's always single, always out. She doesn't understand what it means to build something serious." He started checking my location for safety. Then he'd question me if I stopped for coffee after work, instead of coming straight home. The third red flag came wearing a suit. 2 years into our marriage, he brought home a stack of documents. "Life insurance," he said lightly. "It's just responsibility. We're married now. If something happened to you, I'd be lost." He talked me through the forms, showing me where to initial, where to sign. What I didn't know was that he was signing my value into 6 zeros, with him as the sole beneficiary. We tell ourselves these things are love. We call control caring, and isolation protection. Lying in that clinic, bruised and half broken, those memories were replayed with a new filter. None of it was random. It was a pattern, and the biggest red flag of all had come just days before my father died. Ethan had stood in the doorway as I sat on the floor, surrounded by old photos and legal papers from the attorney's office. "So, the ghost finally calls," he'd said, nodding at the envelope with my father's name. "Must be weird, him crawling out of the grave with lawyer letters and regrets." "Ide Fronut, I never told you his lawyers contacted me." He smiled quickly. "Babe, you've been talking about him nonstop. If they didn't, I'd be shocked." Then he'd changed the subject so fast my suspicion barely had time to form. Now looking back, I saw it. The question was disguised as a joke. The way he'd studied that envelope. The tightness in his jaw when I said, "I don't care what money he left. I just want closure." I'm sharing these details because somewhere, someone watching this is explaining away the exact same signs. You call it loyalty. You call it compromise. You call it, that's just how relationships are. So let me ask you, at what point in this story would your stomach have started to twist? Was it the accounts? Friends? Life insurance? Tell me honestly in the comments, would you have walked away sooner? Or did you just recognize your own relationship with mine? The nurse returned, interrupting my spiral. She checked my vitals, then paused, studying my face. "You are afraid," she said quietly. "Not of water. Of someone." I swallowed. "My husband pushed me," I whispered. "He thinks I drowned." She didn't gasp. Didn't tell me I must be mistaken. Her eyes just hardened in a way that told me. She'd heard stories like this before. "Then you must not let him know you lived," she said. "For now you are nobody. Understand?" As she walked away, the weight of her words settled over me like a second blanket. For the first time since I'd fallen, I had more than fear. I had a choice. If I stayed dead, I might finally be out from under Ethan's control. But if I disappeared, how was I supposed to fight a man who already knew how to weaponize my silence? When freedom comes disguised as a fake name and a forged discharge paper, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like running barefoot in the dark, hoping you don't step on glass. The nurse introduced herself properly that evening. "Amara," she said, resting a hand lightly on my arm. I spoke to the doctor. No police yet. Too many questions. She hesitated, then added, "A man came asking. Foreign, well-dressed. He showed a picture." She mimed holding up a phone. "You." My heart slammed against my ribs, pain radiating from the bruise where Ethan's kick had landed. "Did he say who he was?" I asked. "Husband," she replied. She watched my face closely as she said it. "I told him no such patient. He left a number." Very angry. Of course he was angry. He'd thrown his problem into the ocean. It wasn't supposed to crawl back onto land. Amara leaned closer. "In this place, men's stories are believed first," she said softly. "If he says accident, people nod. If you say he push. People ask, but why? He is your husband." She glanced at the corridor, then back at me. "If you stay, they will find you. If you go home, he will find you faster. So you need another option." That other option arrived the next morning in the form of a simple burner phone and a handwritten number pressed into my palm. "Lawyer." I guessed. Amara shook her head. "Friend of cousin. Helps women disappear. Temporary." She held my gaze. Not easy, but better than dead wife who drowned for insurance. Yes. Her bluntness knocked the breath out of me. But she was right. I stared at the generic white ceiling, feeling my old life collapsing like a building on controlled demolition. My job, my apartment, my friends who thought I was at some dreamy coastal retreat with my husband. They'd soon be posting crying emojis under news articles about my tragic accident. And somewhere a law firm in Manhattan was waiting for an answer from a client they believed was safely married, not floating between life and erasure in a foreign clinic. My thumb hovered over my email icon. Then slowly, I opened a browser instead and created a brand new account under a name I'd never used in my life. To j.harrison@harrisonandlowell.com. Subject, Estate of Jonathan Reed. Mr. Harrison, this is Maya Reed. I am alive, but in danger. I cannot explain everything yet. Do not contact my husband under any circumstances. Reply only to this address. M. I hit send before I could overthink it. An hour later, a reply pinged back. Ms. Reed, I'm relieved to hear from you. We have seen the reports of your accident. Your safety is our priority. All communication will remain strictly confidential. When you are ready, we can arrange secure transport and protection. Until then, do not use any channels your husband may monitor. Harrison. The words protection and transport didn't calm me. They terrified me, because stepping into that world, private jets, black sedans, secured buildings, would also mean stepping back into visibility. And visibility was exactly what Ethan was hunting for. If this story has you thinking about your own boundaries and what you'd risk for peace, make sure you're subscribed. I'm only just getting to the part where I stop running and start fighting back, and you don't want to miss how this turns. That night, Amara helped me change into borrowed clothes. Loose pants, long sleeves, a scarf that hid most of my hair, and bruised neck. The discharge papers listed me under a different name. No note about a helicopter. Just near drowning, stabilized, released. A beat-up taxi waited by the back entrance, engine idling like it was nervous too. As we reached the door, Amara squeezed my hand. Remember, she said, love that makes you small is not love. Trust your fear next time, not his smile. The next time. The idea that there could be a next time with anyone felt impossible. The car pulled away, the clinic shrinking in the rearview mirror, along with the last official record of the woman the world believed had died. I was nobody now. No ID, no home, just a body that refused to sink, and a secret worth $200 million that could either save my life or put a bigger target on my back than ever. Was I really slipping my way toward freedom in that anonymous taxi, or just trading one kind of cage for another, built from fear, fake names, and a husband's unfinished intentions? The safe house didn't look safe. It looked forgotten. Peeling blue paint, a rusted balcony, a metal door that stuck before it opened. This is temporary, the woman said. She introduced herself as Lila. Sharp eyes, no patience for self-pity. You sleep. You heal. You don't post selfies. Understand? I nodded. Inside, the apartment was sparse but clean. One bedroom, A small kitchen. A fan that clicked every third rotation. It was more than I'd had in the ocean. It still felt like a cell. The days blurred at first. Exhaustion hit me harder than any wave. My body slept. My mind didn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's foot, the open helicopter door, the ocean rushing up like a punishment. On the third day, an email arrived from Harrison again. Ms. Reed, we will begin probate proceedings regardless of your public status. Your father's assets are significant and complex, but you remain the sole heir. We strongly advise you to consider formal protection before your husband is made aware of his state. Sole heir. Heir to what exactly? Over an encrypted video call. Harrison walked me through it. Properties, stocks, shell companies I'd never heard of, all tied back to a man who'd sent birthday cards but never showed up. $200 million. On paper, I had more power than I'd ever imagined. In this little apartment above a noisy street, I struggled to pay cash for groceries without trembling. Can we keep Ethan from finding out? I asked. My voice sounded small even to me. We can delay notification, Harrison said carefully. But not forever. Legally, as your spouse, he is entitled to certain disclosures. And if he believes you are deceased. He didn't have to finish. If Ethan thought I was dead, he'd cash the life insurance, maybe cry on TV once or twice, and move on with his carefully curated grief. If he learned I was alive and newly wealthy, every ugly part of him I'd ignored would come crawling into the light. That afternoon, Lila brought in a tiny TV. The news will talk about you whether you watch or not, she said. Better to know the story they're telling. She wasn't wrong. Within minutes, I saw Ethan's face again. He stood outside our old apartment building, eyes rimmed with red, voice rough. She was the strongest person I knew, he said to the reporter. She'd been through so much with her father's passing. We thought this trip would help her clear her head. I tried to grab her when the chopper shook, but... He swallowed theatrically. I keep seeing her fall. If I didn't know the feel of his kick, I might have believed him. The reporter's caption read, "Husband of drowning victim. I did everything I could." It was like watching a stranger wear my life as a costume. Later that night, an email slid into my encrypted inbox from an address I didn't recognize. Subject, you don't know me, but I know him. My finger hovered above the trackpad before I opened it. Maya. My name is Hannah. I used to be Ethan's assistant. I saw the news. If you're really alive, you're in more danger than you think. He's not just grieving. He's cleaning up. And if your father left you what Ethan thought he would, he won't stop until that money, and you, are under his control. If you want proof, I have it. My stomach dropped. I'd always assumed Ethan's darkness started with me. Our marriage. Our choices. But what if I just walked into a life he'd been scripting for years? Reading all this, you're probably thinking about evidence. What you'd need to finally believe someone meant you harm. So tell me in the comments. If an ex-employee of your partner reached out like this, would you read it, or would you delete it and cling to the version of them you fell in love with? I wrote back with shaking hands. Hannah, I'm alive. Send whatever you have. Please. M. Her reply came with a single attachment, a compressed folder titled, Before She Fell. As I clicked it open, I had no idea that the files inside would prove Ethan hadn't just tried to kill me on that helicopter. He'd been building toward that moment, since long before I ever said, I do. What do you do when you realize your marriage was never a love story, but a long con with your name on the last page? The first file was an audio recording, dated 3 weeks before the helicopter ride. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the tiny room. Okay, he said, his tone eerily calm. If the worst happens, you have to stay composed. It all happened so fast. She slipped. The pilot said it was safe. Got it. Another male voice, one I didn't recognize, murmured agreement. My blood turned to ice. Click. Another recording. I mean, her dad's not going to live forever, Ethan's voice again. More casual this time, like he was on a call. And when that money finally lands, do you really think I'm going to let her run around handing it out to every charity and sad story she's ever met? Please. One way or another, it ends up in the right hands. Silence. Then a soft laugh. His laugh. I closed my eyes. He'd known. About my father. About the likely inheritance. Long before I did. There were emails, too. Screenshots of messages between Ethan and an insurance agent, arguing over payout timelines. Drafts of statements labeled, if needed, helicopter incident. All dated before my father's burial. Before my accident. When I finally lifted my head from a laptop, Lila was watching me from the doorway. "You've found what you were not looking for," she said quietly. I nodded, throat too tight to speak. "We sent the files to Harrison through an encrypted portal. He called within the hour." "Maya," he said, voice low but steady, "this is more than a motive. This is premeditation, insurance fraud, attempted homicide. If we take this to law enforcement now, they will open a criminal investigation." My heart thudded against my ribs. "But that means telling them I'm alive," I said. "And once that happens, Ethan will know too." "Yes," Harrison replied, "which is why you need to decide what matters more right now. Staying a ghost a little longer, or making sure he never gets the chance to throw anyone else out of anything ever again." Control. That was the word that kept echoing in my head. Ethan had spent years taking it from me, one loving gesture at a time. "Hand me your passwords. Sign this policy. Let me manage the bills. Wear this. Don't see her. Don't go there." Now, for the first time, I had a sliver of control he couldn't touch. The choice of when to step back into his world, and on what terms. If you're still with me right now, hearing how deep this went, make sure you're subscribed, because the moment I decide to stop hiding and walk straight into his line of sight is the moment this story stops being about survival and starts being about justice. Over the next week, Harrison and his team move quietly. They contacted a small, specialized unit in the States that dealt with financial crimes and domestic violence. They compiled timelines, traced insurance applications, and cross-referenced Hannah's files with Ethan's business accounts. In the background, probate continued. On paper, I was becoming wealthier by the day. In reality, I was counting coins to buy bread and cash. So no trail led back to me. The agents Harrison connected us with were frank. "We can't arrest him off this alone," one of them said on a secure call. "It's strong, but he'll spin it as grief planning, worst case thinking. However, if you're willing to testify, and if we can catch him in a lie once he thinks you're still under his thumb, we have a case." Testify. The word tasted like electricity and nausea. I thought about the other women who'd sat in hospital beds like mine, telling themselves it was an accident, that he didn't mean it, that he was under a lot of stress. Women who never got the chance to read the emails, hear the recordings, or sit across from their abuser in courtroom. I'd survived for a reason. Maybe this was it. "Start the process," I said. "We'll do it, but on my terms." Because there was one more variable none of us could ignore: the inheritance. Once the estate fully transferred, there would be legal notifications, paperwork Ethan's lawyers could access, stories the press might sniff out. My $200 million secret wouldn't stay secret much longer. And when Ethan learned that the wife he thought he'd drowned was not only alive but richer than his wildest projections, he'd either run or come for me himself. When the world finally heard my name again, would I be stepping forward as a woman in control of her story, or bait walking into one last trap laid by the man who'd built our entire life on lies? The announcement was only 3 sentences long, but it detonated like a bomb. Contrary to earlier reports, Ms. Maya Reed survived the helicopter incident off the Atlantic coast. She has been recovering privately and requests respect for her privacy as she navigates ongoing legal and personal matters. No location, no photos, just the fact of my survival. Within hours, my name trended. Hashtag Maya Reed alive. Hashtag helicopter wife. Talk shows are debated. Was it a miracle? A hoax? A cover-up? Ethan's team moved even faster. He went from grieving widower to concerned husband, almost overnight. On one channel, I watched him shake his head, playing the part of the bewildered spouse. "She's been through unimaginable trauma," he told the host, voice heavy with manufactured concern. "If she thinks I'd ever hurt her, it just shows how deep her psychological wounds are. All I want is for her to get help. Whatever I can do, I'll do it." On another network, a source close to the couple hinted that I had a history of anxiety, and struggled with reality under stress. I recognized the language. It was the same vocabulary he'd used in private. Whenever I questioned him, "You're overreacting, Maya. You're imagining things. Your memory is playing tricks on you." Watching the world swallow his performance, it was like drowning all over again. Then came the legal punch. Harrison called one morning, voice clipped. "Ethan has filed a petition," he said. "He's requesting that your inheritance be placed under his management, on the grounds that you are currently mentally and emotionally unfit to handle your own affairs." I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly, sickeningly predictable. The man who tried to kill me was now asking the court system to let him protect me from myself and from my own money. He's claiming I'm unstable. I said, "He kicked me out of a helicopter." "And we are going to prove that," Harrison replied. "But we have to be smart. Right now, the public only knows you as a headline. Dead wife comes back to life. We need to show them the pattern." Together with the investigators, we built timeline. The insurance policies, the emails, the recordings, my medical records from the clinic, accounts of his controlling behavior from friends like Kayla and ex-employees like Hannah. It was sickening how neatly it all clicked into place. Once I stopped trying to round the corners for him, to the outside world, it looked like a tragic accident, followed by a messy estate battle. Inside those files, it looked like an equation. Wife with wealthy father plus life insurance plus debt-ridden husband equals one very convenient turbulence incident. Somewhere between depositions and document reviews, I caught a news panel where two anchors debated my sanity. "She's accusing her own husband of attempted murder," one said, eyebrows arched. "Could this just be grief talking?" The other shrugged. "Or could it be a woman finally calling out the red flags we tell people to ignore for the sake of keeping the peace at home?" That line stuck with me. For years, I'd put peace above my own safety. Now, peace looked suspiciously like silence. If you were a stranger scrolling through those headlines, whose version would you believe first? The polished, devastated husband, or the invisible wife claiming he'd kicked her into the ocean? Tell me in the comments. Would you trust your gut or the glossy story on your screen? The court scheduled a preliminary hearing to decide whether Ethan's petition over my inheritance had any merit and whether criminal charges would move forward. Before that could happen, the judge ordered a mediation session, a non-adversarial setting, where both parties could explore potential resolutions. In other words, a room, me, him, our lawyers, and, though he didn't know it yet, a small army of investigators and prosecutors, watching from behind the glass. When Harrison asked if I was willing to attend in person, my whole body went cold. Seeing Ethan again meant looking directly at the man who had calmly chosen my death, but also meant something else. The chance to show him that the woman he thought would sink quietly had learned how to swim and was done pretending his storms were weather and not war. How do you prepare to sit across from the person who turned your love into a murder plot and still keep your voice steady enough to finally tell the truth? The mediation room looked harmless. Neutral walls, a long wooden table, too many chairs. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was where people sorted out car accidents and neighbor disputes, not attempted murder wrapped in wedding vows. I arrived an hour early, partly for security protocol, mostly so my legs would stop shaking before he walked in. Behind a mirrored wall, agents and attorneys arranged files, tested recording equipment, and checked the live feed from the hallway. Harrison placed a folder in front of me. "Remember," he said, "you don't have to argue with him. You don't have to convince him. You are here to be seen, to be heard, and to let the evidence speak louder than his performance." I nodded, fingers twisting in my lap. In the reflection of the glass, I barely recognized myself. Thinner, yes, but also sharper somehow. Edges where there used to be apologies. If you've been following my story this far, you probably feel that tension in your own chest. If you want to see what it looks like when a woman who was supposed to vanish walks straight back into the line of fire on her own terms, make sure you're subscribed. The moment he walks through that door is the moment everything changes. The door handle clicked, For a heartbeat, I was back in the helicopter, waiting for the lurch, the drop, the betrayal. Then he walked in. Ethan looked smaller in person than he did on TV. Grief hadn't emaciated him. Fear had. Still, the performance switched on. The moment his eyes found mine. Maya, he breathed, hand over his heart like I was a ghost. Look at you. There it was. The charm, the concern, the subtle insinuation that I was fragile. This whole thing is a misunderstanding. He moved like he might come around the table to hug me. The security officer in the corner shifted. Ethan seemed to think better of it, and sat down instead. For a split second, our knees almost touched under the table. "How have you been?" he asked softly, as if we'd run into each other at a coffee shop, not a court-ordered confrontation. "Recovering," I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded calm, clear. The mediator cleared her throat. "We're here today to discuss Mr. Cole's petition regarding Ms. Reed's estate, and to explore any potential misunderstandings regarding the events of the helicopter incident." "Misunderstandings," Ethan repeated, shaking his head like the word hurt him. "I don't misunderstand anything. My wife fell. She was under enormous stress after her father died. She wasn't herself. And now, people have got into her head and convinced her I somehow pushed her." He looked at me then, eyes glassy. "Is that really what you think of me, May?" He always called me May, when he wanted me to doubt myself. I held his gaze. "I don't think so," I said quietly. "I remember it." A flicker, just the slightest tick in his jaw. Then the mask slid back. He sighed dramatically. "I'm not here to fight with you," he said. "I'm here because I love you. Because I know you beneath all this paranoia. You're not like this." I almost laughed. It was such a perfect distillation of our marriage. Him defining who I really was. So he never had to face who he really was. Harrison spoke up. "Mr. Cole," he said, "with all due respect, this mediation is not about your feelings. It's about your documented actions, before, during, and after the incident. We have questions." Ethan spread his hands. "Ask whatever you like. I have nothing to hide." Behind the glass, I saw one of the agents press a button on the console. The tiny red light on the camera blinked on. I looked at the man I had once promised to love, for better or for worse, and realized we had finally arrived. At the worst, after everything he'd done, could I sit in this chair, heart pounding but voice steady, and let the truth land harder than his lies ever had? Or would he still find a way to twist my words, to turn my survival into yet another weapon in his hands? Harrison slid a sheet of paper across the table. "Mr. Cole," he began, "on this date, 3 weeks before the helicopter flight, you recorded a conversation in which you rehearsed statements about a potential accident. It all happened so fast. She slipped. The pilot said it was safe. Do you deny that this recording exists?" Ethan's smile didn't falter, but a vein in his neck pulsed. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "People record everything these days. You could have manufactured anything." Harrison nodded once. "Then perhaps you can explain this." He tapped his tablet. The speakers in the room crackled to life. My husband's voice poured out, calm, measured, going over the lines I'd listened to alone in that cramped, safe house. "If the worst happens, you have to stay composed." Ethan lunged for the tablet. The security officer stepped forward. The mediator held up a hand. "Hannah," Harrison said, turning to the side door. "Would you come in, please?" The door opened. Hannah, smaller than I'd imagined, but with a spine of steel in her posture, stepped into the room. Ethan froze. "You," he spat. "Me," she answered evenly. "I quit the day you said, if she ever inherits, it'll be mine one way or another. Remember that, Ethan." She took a seat, hands folded, unfazed by his glare. "What is this?" Ethan demanded, looking between the mediator, Harrison, and the mirrored wall. "A circus? You drag in disgruntled employees to smear me, and suddenly I'm on trial for being upset that my wife almost died." "You're not on trial," the mediator said carefully. "Not here. We are simply establishing context." Yet, a voice said from the doorway. 2 agents stepped in, badges visible. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Cole," one began. I'm Special Agent Ruiz with the Federal Financial Crimes Task Force. This is Special Agent Monroe with domestic violence and homicide. We've been reviewing your insurance records, your communications about your wife, and the circumstances around your helicopter flight. Ethan laughed, high and sharp. You can't be serious, he said. You're taking her word? She's been hiding. She's clearly not well. He jabbed a finger in my direction. Tell them, May, he insisted. Tell them about your panic attacks after your dad died. Tell them how you forget things. You didn't even remember where you left your car keys half the time. And now we're supposed to trust your memory. About what happened while you were falling out of a helicopter. Old shame flared in my chest. All the times he'd turned everyday human moments into proof that I was unstable. I took a breath. My memory of that day is very clear, I said, because it starts at the moment your foot hits my chest. Silence. Even the air conditioner seemed to hush. I remember the look on your face, I continued. No panique, no surprise, just finality, like you were crossing off an item on a list. I looked at the agents, not at him. I remember that you increased my life insurance policy. A month after my father's first hospitalization. I remember the folder on your laptop, with my maiden name and my father's company on it. I remember you asking if I'd signed anything yet, every time I came back from meeting with his lawyers. My hands didn't shake. For years, I told myself you were just anxious, protective, that your control was love, that your red flags were my overreactions. But falling out of that helicopter was the first time my body finally believed what my gut had been whispering for years. Agent Ruiz opened a manila envelope and slid out a stack of papers. Mr. Cole, he said, we have records of you taking out 3 separate policies on your wife, totaling $5 million, all within 12 months of Mr. Reed's terminal diagnosis. We have drafts of public statements about her accidental death, written before your so-called accident. We have testimony about your attempts to restrict her access to money, to friends, to legal counsel. Agent Monroe leaned forward. And now, she added, we have your wife's sworn statement and corroborating witness accounts of a pattern of coercive control and financial grooming. The mediator swallowed. This mediation is concluded, she said quietly. Ethan's composure cracked. You think this is over? He snapped, turning on me. Do you think any of this makes you safe? You wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for me. You'd still be some exhausted nurse, paying off loans in a crappy studio, if I hadn't taught you how the world works. He pushed back from the table, but the agents were already on their feet. Ethan Cole, Agent Ruiz said, you are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. They recited his rights as they cuffed him. For a second, as they led him past me, our eyes met. There was no love left there. No confusion. Just cold, furious disbelief. That I dared to survive him. And then tell the world. You're nothing without me, he hissed. I made you. No, I said softly. You almost unmade me. There's a difference. The door closed behind him. The trial that followed took months. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty. On all counts. When it was my turn to speak at sentencing, I stood in a room full of strangers and addressed the man in the jumpsuit who'd once promised me forever. I ignored every alarm in my body in the name of love, I told the judge. I let him redefine control as care, jealousy as devotion, fear as my own instability. He counted on that. He counted on me doubting myself more than I doubted him. He almost won. I looked at Ethan one last time. But I survived, I said, and I won't spend that survival staying quiet, just because it makes other people more comfortable. The judge sentenced him to decades behind bars. The gavel fell. The monster was officially a criminal. But walking out of that courtroom, I understood something crucial. A verdict can name what was done to you, but it can't give you back the years you spent silencing yourself for someone else's comfort. If you were me, would you have found the strength to stand up in that courtroom and speak? Or would you have let the system handle it in silence, afraid that saying the words out loud would make everything too real to bear? In the months after Ethan's sentencing, people kept asking me the same question, in different words. So are you okay now? As if a guilty verdict was an eraser. As if money could insulate you from the echo of a boot in your ribs. I wasn't okay. Not in the way they meant. I still woke some nights, convinced I was back in that helicopter. The wind screaming. The door opened. I still flinched when someone raised their voice. Still hesitated before trusting simple kindness. But I was alive. And I had choices that most women who'd stood where I'd stood never got. The inheritance transferred quietly. $200 million in trusts, investments, and companies I was now responsible for. For a while, I couldn't touch it, without thinking of how close Ethan had come to claiming it as his consolation prize for killing me. So I made myself a promise. If this money was going to exist in my life, it would never again be something a man used to trap me. It would be something women used to leave. We set up a foundation in my father's name, not for glossy galas and photo ops, but for unglamorous grants. First month's rent for someone fleeing a violent home. Legal fees for those fighting coercive control. Secure phones for women whose partners monitored everything. We funded trauma-informed training for police departments and clinics in coastal towns. Places like the one where Amara had quietly believed me. When I whispered, my husband pushed me and helped me vanish long enough to live. We supported hotlines where someone on the other end knew the difference between a bad fight and a pattern of control that ends in obituaries labeled accident or tragedy. I stayed off camera. No tearful interviews. No glossy magazine spreads about the heiress who almost died. When I told this story, I wanted it here, with you, without makeup or editing, without the need to perform my pain to be believed. Because this isn't really a story about helicopters or inheritances. It's about the much quieter moments that leads up to the edge. The first time you feel your stomach drop, when your partner checks your phone. The first time they joke about what would happen if you ever left. The first time they convince you that your fear is craziness and their control is love. Those are the moments I want you to remember when you think about me spinning through the air over an endless, uncaring ocean. If sharing this makes even one person take their own red flag seriously before it turns into a crime scene, then surviving wasn't just luck. It was for a purpose. If you've stayed with me all the way to the end of this, you're exactly the kind of person I want in this community. Someone who doesn't look away from hard truths. So if stories like this help you see your own life more clearly, or give you the courage to put your safety before appearances, hit subscribe so you don't miss what we talk about next. The more we say these things out loud, the harder it gets for people like Ethan to hide in the cracks. Sometimes I sit by the water now. Not the Atlantic where I almost died. A quiet lake near the small house I bought in my own name, with my own lawyer, on my own terms. I watch the surface ripple in the wind, and listen to the part of me I used to ignore. The small, steady voice in my gut that says, this feels wrong. Long before the drop. My name is Maya Reed. My husband kicked me out of a helicopter after my father died. Unaware, I had just inherited $200 million. He thought that money would buy him freedom, and that my love would keep me silent. He was wrong on both counts. So I'll leave you with this. When the person who says, I love you, starts asking you to trade pieces of yourself for the sake of peace, what do you owe more loyalty to? Your relationship or your own survival? And when your instincts whisper that something isn't right, will you hush them for the sake of appearances? Or listen, before you find yourself standing at the open door of your own helicopter moment?